Okay, so let's look at some amazing positional chess games, positional
Who's
sacrifices. So Lynn, what do you think about positional sacrifices?
Well, what I was just gonna say is that sometimes when you look at positional sacrifices in an isolated way, and
Mhm.
then you put that same position within the game, it looks different, you know?
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Oh yeah, totally. So you have to like look at it in context, right?
right.
And Uday, what were you saying? Was
Nothing. I was just asking
Oh,
names of
the
the
names of
different.
each game?
Yeah, I can see them now.
Yeah, exactly. So each one, the way I set it up is each one has a summary, like what happened with the positional
Is it-
sacrifice.
feels
And then
like-
yeah, when you click on it, you'll see the players. Well, we even have Stockfish and AlphaZero. But yeah, you'll see the players. So Kasparov, Shirov. We have Karpov and Timman. We have Hare Krishna and Nakamura. And we have Petrosian and Reshevsky. Okay, we have a draw too. But yeah, so basically it's so important to understand positional sacrifices because
this from the
the
2014?
compensation you gain for that, you know, you have to understand positional chess so well to know that it's justified, or to, you know, intuit, I guess, have the intuition that it's justified. What's that?
Is this from the 2014 Springfield Cup?
Which game? The first one?
Yeah.
Or the what? Caruana Karjakin game?
Yep.
I don't know. It doesn't have the name of it. We'll find out once we look at the game. Let's see. Tell me if you think it looks familiar, and then we can look it up. But I don't think when I pulled in the info, I said, let's begin with a fun modern attacking game between two contenders for the world title. Caruana offers a positional sacrifice that is also highly dynamic. Okay. Who said they don't? Yeah. So the thing is, you think positional sacrifice, like it's not an attacking thing, right? But you can certainly use it to attack as well. So it's like, well, what is a king side attack, right? But it obviously, it ultimately would, the goal, no matter what the goal is, to reach the king side attack is a little quicker, but maybe just damage to the pawn structure or something. That could be, it may lead to mate, it may just be not like you double the F pawns, but it may also just be a long-term thing too, right? But whatever element, whatever position element you're gaining, yeah, of course you'd like it to transfer into an attack. Okay, so the first one is to acquire the bishop pair, achieve piece domination, and strip the king's shelter, which sounds pretty vicious, right? Well, it is. It's a really vicious game. But yeah, let's find out what it's from. Maybe if you look up the first few moves of the day, you can see. So we have Caruana playing the black side. E4, E5, knight F3, and yeah, I'm just going to zoom, you know, because usually we'll look closely at the entire game. Well, let's focus in particular on the positional sacrifice. But no, I think we wanted to do 2 parts. Was it? If you want to do 3 and 3 in depth, what do you guys think? Are we gonna? So we're gonna go a little. I mean, the thing is though, when we do the positional sacrifice itself, it'll take us a while, right? Like just understanding that and going beyond that. I do think that's the emphasis, right? So I'm just gonna get us to the part where it gets very interesting. But yeah, you see a Roy Lopez where they don't take on C6, they drop back, and a provoking B5. That's fine with white, because then they're usually going to strike at the pawn with what? Who usually strikes at this B pawn? C pawn or A pawn?
Okay.
Yeah, usually you play A4 and you can try to open up the A file and just have a target, you know. Make them, well, you induce them to overextend, like a lot of openings. Black plays B5 and the queen's gambit accepted. White wants them to push. So you kind of induce that overextension. We know that B pawns and G pawns have problems when they push, you know, the weaknesses on the A and H files, and obviously starting to weaken the F and the C file squares. So yeah, so you induce that. Bishop C5. I think that's called like the Archangelsk or something. It's actually, I looked up, it's actually some town in Russia, I think, and it was, I thought it was just, you know, an archangel, but yeah, it's named after a town in Russia where it was first played, apparent, or where it was popular. You know about it?
Northern Russia.
It's in northern Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's spelled like Archangel, SK at the end or something. Sorry, transliterated. Okay, so D6, D4. So Karjakin is just going all out for the center. Yeah, he can play more modestly with D3, but he's just going D4, taking over the center. Bishop B3, castles, Knight BD2, bishop B7. So yeah, this is typical. You know, it's an interesting opening actually for black. Well, you'll probably like it after seeing this game. But yeah, look at those bishops. You know, they have a lot of potential energy there, right? So the thing is, white has a big center, but you're just looking for opportunities to blow up in the position. You say, okay, well, you have 2 pawns on the 4th, I have 1, like a Philidor's defense, right? That tight structure, like we looked at with Diego's games where he plays the structure and he would play very aggressively, right? Where he'd often be playing on the king side too. But yeah, you never know. It could transfer. What if they push and the knight starts coming over? The other thing is when they push, you can strike at him with C6 soon, and we're going to start blasting open those lines. So it's not that simple for white, you know, and black is going to take. There's a famous recent Carlsen game like that within the past few years where he plays a really cool game. I think it was actually against Caruana. You guys remember that? I think Caruana had white, and then Carlsen blasts it open, and then he has a loose bishop on B3, and Carlsen has like some, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Caruana Carlsen, like maybe 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago. It's pretty cool. But yeah, but the idea is that you're going to loosen up those pawns. So it's kind of like you say, you know, not really quite, it's not quite hyper modern, but hyper modern, the idea is to strike at the center. But this is not hyper modern because black is certainly meeting white in the center the best he can, right? Because white had the first move, so he got D4 in first, right? But black is going to strike back against it and just try to prove that it's going to get overextended. Well, he's going to take it. So it's important to understand that context. See, when he moves, okay, so it's like, why are you moving your knight? It looks kind of funny, right? It's like, is the knight just gonna have to go home? Well, I mean, it's pretty direct threat, right? You kind of just want to go knight D3 and take the pawn and, you know, fork the rook and the pawn. And I guess you can, I don't know if you're going to make it out alive or you're going to have to give it back possibly. But at the same time, you know, it makes him worry about it. Like he's probably not going to ignore, he's probably not going to play A3, right? Because even if he does that, like let's say you go A3. No, actually, you would just probably take this pawn right away. If he goes A3, he wouldn't deal with this pawn. So you could do that. You could take and wrap around, but you have to give the pawn back, right? But yeah, I'd probably just take this one. If he doesn't, you should be able to get away with that. A little tricky, but something like this you can get away with, I think. We'd have to look into that anyway. But it is looking at D3. So he deals with it. And now that he's out of the way, he can quickly get in C5. But you see, so all of a sudden, basically black's pieces spring forth, right? Take, knight in. So he's hitting those two pawns. He's striking at the D3 square. And then he strikes again with C5. He's not actually threatening to win anything, but it's just pressure, right? So suddenly he's laying siege to the white center. He's obviously, you know, that rook has to come out. You know the rook's coming here because it's gonna make a lot of sense with the queen on the E file. But yeah, it's not clear yet. It's not like black is better yet or something, but white certainly has to be careful, right? And in this game, he proved that it worked out. But yeah, you know, he's a human, so if he doesn't play this perfectly, he can mess this up, right? Well, he might play C4, but probably not. I think you just want to really keep your pressure. It's kind of like in a queen's gambit. You guys know, like D4, D5. And then, you know, when after C4, you know how white usually doesn't, just because they can doesn't mean they should push to C5 and give up the tension. If you look at the Steinitz first world championship, official world championship in '86, right? Zuckertorp does that twice and he's punished. So yeah, so pushing forward, this would give up the tension, right? So yeah, and this is all just like beginning with the positional understanding here. Then we're going to see how it all ties together. Okay, knight back to C6. So obviously now he wants the pawn. He can take it if he wants on the next move. So he provokes D5. Now, interestingly, this, like we talked about how openings transpose. So once you play C, it's like sometimes you can even get Sicilians if C5 is played later. But when it trades, you get a Sicilian-like structure, right? Because imagine that C and D were traded. Well, white has the E pawn and the D pawn missing. Black would have the C pawn. So it'd be kind of like a Sicilian. Now by pushing, it becomes like another opening out of D4. You guys know what opening this would be considered after D5 and black with his activity with the B and C pawns? What would that resemble structurally? Forget about the opening moves, but the structure.
Benoni.
Yeah, it's like a Benoni. Do you guys recall that?
Yes, I was just looking over my records for all of the classes we did, and we talked about Benoni. Yes.
Yeah, because the Benoni, I don't, oh, probably when we looked at hypermodern openings, I have another, so 2 studies that where I put a lot of games in and put some work into the analysis. This one I did put work into the analysis. I'll put in the YouTube video too. I have it. Yeah, no way. Not all the games have analysis, but no, it does. Yeah, this is the first game, so I probably focus more. But no, I think let's see. I did some analysis, some more qualitative. But no, the idea is just, it's got to be qualitative. It's positional, right? That's the thing. It's almost like positional sacrifice. If you think of it like quantitative, it would be like the pure, computer moves, calculate like in the old school, boom, 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 calculate, check, and mate, right? But now computers, they have to have a more qualitative, like rougher, kind of more intuitive understanding, which is the idea of the neural network, right? So you have to explain those things. So you can't just make the moves, right? And that's the weakness I was talking about last night with a student of mine. That's the weakness of computers, that they're not that great. Although chess.com has become better at it. Have you guys noticed that? If you look at chess.com analysis, it tries to do the explanatory AI thing. Oh, we talked about that before, but it's gotten a little bit better. They've worked on it, but obviously it's not like a coach and it can throw you off. So H3, like HI, like AI in general, it'll just throw you off sometimes with its hallucinations, right? So rook E8, bishop C2. But that's coming. And this is, again, very common in a Benoni, right? Because you're gonna have the half open E file and black. So it begins though D4 and then maybe knight F6 first and then C5. And then white bypasses. That's the structure, right? It comes after the first few moves, or it can happen on move 6, 17. It could happen on move 15, So knight G6. So there you go, right? There's that knight swarming the king side. So you can see that black is certainly going after what color squares versus white. Obviously white, you can see that they're equal in terms of what the pawn structure is guarding, the squares that they're controlling more. What would it be for white and for black? I mean, not white and black squares. I mean, what for black, which color is in light and dark, basically, because it could be blue squares, whatever, right? But we say light squares, dark squares. If you guys probably know what I meant. But for black, what squares, and for white, which squares are we generally speaking controlling or fighting for?
With black, it's the dark squares.
Yeah, like obviously E5, right? Because you just went knight G6. So E5 for sure, because you have your pawn there, your knight, your rook, half open file. So, well, in controlling it, why does it matter? Well, for starters, if you didn't have any control, then white's going to blast through, like a lot of times what white will play for F4 early in Benoni, sometimes not even before the knight comes out, and they want to just play E5. What if your D pawn wasn't there? They would just, well, then you have to worry about this pawn. But like assuming they had usually they have actually like this, they can support the D pawn. They push forward, right? Push to E5. So E5 is important, if nothing else, to restrict your opponent. And also look at the F4 square. What if you go like that? That's always annoying. My student just did that to me and gave me a hard time by maneuvering his knight to F4, and he had some battery here, and he could have done a sack to pull my queen away. But yeah, it was it would have won a free pawn. But yeah, this is very strong. Knight E5 is strong. Just holding the squares, and then obviously D4. Well, what do you do with it? Well, hey, at least white doesn't use it. So at the very least, black is restraining white. Now, as for the light squares, yeah, white has pawns on light squares. He can't really get any pieces there anytime soon. And if anything, it's a liability, you can see. While nothing's hanging yet, 2 attackers, 2 defenders, this is obviously guarded by the pawn. But like I said, maybe there's something on the queen is on the E file along with the rook. So if the bishop moves, well, then you got knight takes or bishop takes D5. If the bishop is like somewhere else. Yeah, I think if it was bishop G5, you can play bishop takes D5, right? Can't take back. So things like that. So there's certainly pressure on the light squares. So white is actually sort of maybe attacking, black is attacking on the light squares, holding them back on the dark squares. So it seems it was worked out pretty well so far for black. I mean, obviously white is just trying to hold fast to those light squares and restrain the bishop, make the bishop bite on granite, right? But this bishop, I mean, yeah, you can play C4, but think about it. If you go C4, well, you give up the dark square a bit, right? Then the knight comes in and maybe he's looking at C6 and stuff. Maybe F5, C6, you take it, probably maybe F5. That's annoying, just like this is annoying for us. So there's a lot of key squares that are both in the center and peripheral squares, right? It's kind of, I forget, you guys know the name for that? I remember seeing some name for it. I mean, I kind of intuitively know what it is, but there's a name. It's like a bullseye. You have like 100 and you have 50 and stuff. There's like the periphery. You guys know the name for that? It's still essentially the center. It's just not as important to control maybe C5, it's D5, but it still matters a lot because it
I
controls.
know there's like the big center and I don't know if that's.
Yeah, it
what
might
it's
just be the
called.
big, yeah, I think it's the big center, possibly just to understand it as it radiates out. But yeah, you just want to have your pieces there. If you can't have them there, well, it's like, remember we did the one about dominating the center? Was it Botvinnik? Well, the one where he had like all this, remember who did that? Remember the one where he had like pieces here all over those squares. So hey, he took the 4 central squares and he took 2 more in the big center, right? Why not, right? If you could take them all, go ahead, right? Well, then beyond that, and you're invading your opponent's territory too. It could be here, it's not center, but it's cascading into their territory. So anyway, but yeah, certainly Black has done very well on square control, file pressure, diagonal. Now again, like there's nothing there yet. You're biting on granite currently. But what if this collapses? Maybe you get F5 in later. Who knows if it works? It's a little risky, but you never know. And that would demolish this, would dissolve the pawn chain if you ever move the knight and play F5. And this bishop, you can go to A. Actually, I think it does go to A5. You can potentially say, but just don't do C4 yet.
A5.
What's that?
I was looking at bishop A5.
Yeah, bishop A5 actually does occur. Okay.
I don't know when though.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
there it is right there. That's funny.
That is funny. It just look like a nice little pin.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a pin and it can't really stop you actually. The only move to stop you from going in would be queen D3, which doesn't look that pleasant. I think well, then she's just walking into some knight hops then, right? Again, that knight, if she's here, you can always do knight A5 to C4. So yeah, that's the only way. Well, see, we're harvesting those weak squares now. Well, what are the weak squares? I mean, I circled those 2. I mean, everything in here is pretty weak, right? These are, I call those soft points, right? Kind of like B3, those are kind of softened up, right? Like imagine, so if your pawn were on A2, B3 would be harder, I guess, right? There you got it. Now it's softened up. Oh. So we have some weak points. But besides that, I mean, and we've talked about that, like inherently everything that can't be guarded by a pawn is weak. That's why F7 and F2 is weak. They can't be guarded by a pawn and only the king guards them, right? So they're weak, they're weak and they're accessible, right? So it's really accessibility. Like D2 is weak, right? Well, we're pinning it, right? But D2 can't be guarded by a pawn, but it's very easily defended, like E7, right? Like, but in the future, hey, it's a weak point. So if we're not there, then the rook can come in, right? So it's an interesting look, because I wasn't really taught that, but the more I look at it, you know, it just makes sense because you're taught, well, a weakness is something that can't be defended by a pawn. That's basically it, right? Now, as for E5, it's not defended by a pawn now, so it's accessible, right? But is it weak? Well, F4 could be played, but if F4 is played, then the E pawn can never be guarded by F3. So by extension, E5 is kind of weak. Either it's E5 or E4, and that's if they even can play F4. We can also occupy F4. Well, F4, is it weak? Well, they could play G3, but if they play G3, your knight's going to take H3, or bishop can reroute. So you see, it's all connected. But the point is, it's a very porous position for white. It's just a question of, can you actually get in there? And well, he does, because the queen doesn't want to go D3 and walk into things. And then he just anchors the bishop. So it's kind of like, it's almost like we have, well, it's funny because in a Benoni, in a modern Benoni, you would fianchetto your bishop. That's effectively what's happened. It's as if it had been fianchettoed and dropped on C3. So you see how he really morphed it into, well, effectively what he's done is he started with an E4, E5 opening, and then he morphed it into a favorable Benoni for black. But again, like the opening doesn't matter, but it's the point is it's about the structure, right? So you have this type of pawn structure that just works out well. I mean, the C pawn's not there, then I can utilize the C4 square. It actually, if it's safe, but then the E4 pawn's under pressure. So basically Caruana has just about everything he wants, except for one piece that we talked about briefly. Which piece would like to be doing much more in black's position?
Probably the bishop.
Yes, and okay, Nikki, I'll leave this one to you. Where are we gonna activate that bishop? Just like the other one? Kind of like the other one, what do we do?
C. Would it come down to C8?
Yeah, certainly you can do that. He actually did it a different way, but that would actually probably work too.
Yeah.
C8 to D7. Are you thinking C8 to D7 there, Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, that would get him out of the hole right there.
You
You
can,
know.
yeah, it's gonna be better on D7 unless you want to try to sacrifice on D5. But going to C8, you can hit H3, you can go to D7, but there's another way, which is again similar to what happened before, Nikki, when you thought of the other bishop. What's the other way that you can get out?
A5, A6.
Yeah, so you push, now your bishop came out, so you kind of made way for your A pawn. Now your A pawn pushes, you see, Lynn, then your bishop comes to A6 with tempo. Well, they can maybe like go bishop D3. Let's see what they do, but I'm pretty sure he goes to A5, A6, let's see. Well, A4 was played, so it's very natural to play A5 now. And keep in mind in this structure, there are a bunch of pieces, but when you remove the pieces, you have to watch out for, you have to watch out for C4 to get a passed pawn and promote it pretty quickly. So this is actually an asset, kind of an asset here. B3 is theoretically weak, right? A5 is theoretically weak too. A5, D6, those are the bases of our pawn chains, right? They're fixed. And as for whether it's accessible, like B3 is not completely, but it's fixed in place. So is A5. Hey, that's very accessible. We got to watch out for there, right? In the future. But assuming everything's gone, we might have the C4 idea now as well to get a passed pawn. So we also have bishop A6 coming. Now the question is, what about bishop D3? Does he do that? He does that, of course. Otherwise, we're just going to take over the diagonal. Okay, he goes H6. Now let's get to the sacrifice. Okay, so queen D1, bishop A6. So he actually does trade it, but keep in mind, it's interesting. He's giving up. So this is the thing. It's not a sacrifice, but it's about trading one imbalance for another. That's the key thing to understand. When you're sacrificing material, you're trading one thing for another. So we're trading off a good bishop. Theoretically, it was biting on granite, so it says, well, yeah, it's interesting. It's all relative. This is considered the good bishop for white. This is the good bishop for black. But it's funny, right? Because this is our quote bad bishop, but it certainly became, well, we made it active. That's why you did bishop A5 to B4 and you locked it in, right? So it's all in the same color, just like in a dragon, you know, some dragon of Benoni, right? Those pawns are going to be like D6 and C5, at least D6 and E7, you know, maybe this got traded off, but it's going to be on the same color as the pawns, but it still activated itself. So this is considered white's bad bishop. But hey, maybe they can unleash it. They're already looking here. But so you're giving up your quote good bishop for their bad bishop. That's sort of sacrificing. It's sort of it's not sacrifice. It's what is a sacrifice? The way I would like to understand it is you're not really. Yeah, you're not. The idea of a sacrifice is, again, like Jeremy Silman, you're giving up one imbalance for another. One element, and an imbalance is one element of the position. So it might be pawn structure, it might be minor piece placement. You're giving up the fact that you have a good minor piece, right? You're giving that up for another one, but what I'm getting is we're getting a square control because the bishop controls a lot of light squares. That's probably what he was thinking there. And again, it's all relative too, because just like we talked about before this recording about doubled pawns. Well, obviously they're not always bad. Well, quote bad bishop is not always bad. In this case, both, well, especially black's quote bad bishop is very nice because it's outside the pawn chain. Not so nice on where it was before, right? B6. Now it's a great bishop. So anyway, we're trading something that seems pretty good for something not as good in orthodoxy, I guess. But it's just you're getting something which is you're trying. See, if he had traded, if he doesn't trade, fine, we get the diagonal. We just won. That's an imbalance. Who's controlling the diagonal?
That's a positional move, right?
Bishop A6.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the thing. But like if you're going to sacrifice something, so effectively you're giving up material for some other gain, something else of value, right? So so something of value here would be the D3 square. So if he were to take it, well, now you got to worry about the pieces coming into D3. Oh, and by the way, also just very direct E4 pawn being having to be defended, and that might just fall actually. So there's that too. But it's light squares in general, right? Like, yeah, it's weak light squares. So that bishop was the guardian. It was anchoring in the E pawn and then certain squares. But yeah, I think actually very directly is this. But also in the future, you might swarm on the light squares too. Oh, look at the B. Remember we talked about B3. So all that stuff. So again, it's not so, but I think I wouldn't look at it as a sacrifice. I would view it as a trade. I think that's a useful way to understand it. So you're, yeah, like anything that happens. So let's say you're giving up a queen or for a checkmate. Well, you're just trading material for something else, right? or yeah, it's just different things of different value. Or so you'll see, yeah, you're giving up, but like very directing, like you're giving up, yeah, you're giving them bad pawn structure. Oh, sorry, you have bad pawn structure, we have a lead in development. So it's just trading pawn structure for development. It's just a trade. You could say you sacrificed your pawn structure if you want, but it's just an exchange that's occurred, right? It's just a different type of exchange. A knight for a bishop. You didn't sacrifice your knight. You gave up a knight, but you got a bishop in return. It's a trade. Now the question is, was it really a good trade or not? Well, that's to be determined. That's where you have to use your judgment, and you can't always know, right? But you do your best, and that's, you develop that sense over time, and that's what we're working on in understanding this, right? So what I say here is in terms of the assessment leading to the sacrifices, but see, this has just been positional play, and the sacrifices are simply a continuation of that. I'm saying he's already developing a strong advantage, because you said, like I said, the imbalances. Look at the diagonals. We talked about
Yeah,
that.
the diagonal from what, A6 to F1 is, he's controlling it entirely.
Yeah, and you can't challenge. Yeah, now so either he gives him, so when you trade off the bishops, he'd be giving him some squares. Now white decided to control the squares, but he has an awful bishop. And
Yeah,
now you're seeing the bad bishop in effect. Just like on
Yeah.
B6, it was bad. Now, not to say it can't become good, but it's
Right.
bad. It's real bad right now. It's
Right.
linked to its reputation as a bad bishop. Just like on B6 it was. But we modified. We modified it in our favor. Oh, were you going to say something else then?
No.
But yeah, as you said, the diagonals for sure, right? Good bishop versus bad bishop. This bishop's okay on E3, not really doing anything. The knights are pretty much petrified. Well, here's the problem though. Yeah, you can go to C4. Problem is though, the E4 square. So the bishop needs to be, and the bishop's blocking everything, right? But he's trying to guard that, so we have pressure on the E4 square and well, the pawn and the square. And then we have it says one of the situations where white may have come to regret the space gaining D5. So again, that's kind of the provocation of C5. Grab the D4 square, provoke him to push forward. Like closing lines, Karjakin is all dressed up in nowhere. Okay, this is some analysis I wrote a while ago. But yeah, so it looks yeah, it's like he kind of has the space advantage and everything, but what are you gonna do with it, right?
Right. But he's definitely controlling, both his bishops are controlling the diagonal, so he just have to work it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, like that's how you're gonna increase your advantage. You're doing well, but you got to kind of, there has to be that crescendo, right? It's going to be that conversion. Now it's gonna occur through a sacrifice, right? It's like the final ingredient that you're going to need in your solution here to make it really explode, right? So rook A7, King H2. That's nice. Further, so basically it's another improvement. Because though I was going to say, I said which bishop can be improved, or which piece, and you saw Nikki the bishop, right? Of course the rook can be improved too, but first the bishop, right? Now the bishop's out there. Well, of course the rook wants to be in a better spot. So pretty much everything is being maximized. We're maximizing our forces. And then, but once we reach that point, we're gonna have to do something else to really convert, which is what's going to happen here. So G4, a weakening move. Yeah, that's where, see, this is the thing where he was already worse. And now he's just like, yeah, he's just digging a hole now. Because I mean, these are really weak. H3 used to be guarded, now it's not. Like you're just going to look for ways to probe this here. And that gives him even more incentive to go for a sacrifice. Okay, well, here you are. So this is the moment, right? So we could have looked at this in isolation, but yeah, now you have some context, understand what's going on, understanding how black got there, why he has the advantage. So think for a moment about what is the line? What are some candidate moves? And now it's not, yeah, you're going to calculate, but it's not like, see, it's not like a regular tactic. A regular tactic, you do a line in order to gain material or checkmate. In this case, you're doing a combo in order to gain something positional generally of less concrete, something of value though, but you're not winning a piece, you're not getting a checkmate, although you might get closer to that, right? Getting closer to a checkmate, of course, if it works for you. All right, so think about that for a minute. I'll be right there in a second. Yeah, think about that for a minute. What are the candidate moves? How do you begin to exploit this?
Let's see. It moves there. No.
about that?
Well, one is H5, another is a queen D7.
Wondering like if this is the point where it's like the positional sacrifice part, like maybe we
It seems
But-
right. It's right. Right. What I missed the last part, Lynn. What did you suggest? What were you looking at?
No,
it's at
I
H5,
don't know.
which looks good.
I said H5 or either queen D7, but I'm also looking at, because it could be a sacrifice to loosen up his stuff back there. Knight to E, knight can go to E4.
Okay, so you just said a bunch of great candidate moves right there. You said H5 is actually a very, especially if the rook's on H8, but even if not, whenever they play, remember we talked about it, right? If they play B5, like in a Roy Lopez, you provoke that, or an Italian sort of, yeah, mostly Roy Lopez because your bishop goes to B5 when it drops back, A4. So when they go G4 or G5, you would strike with the H pawn. Of course, they're going to bypass most likely, but sometimes that's fine for you because it's more accessible. Like maybe it opens up it would open this up, right? So maybe not in this instance, but certainly that's a candidate move. And you also, what was the second move that you said? Queen D7? Something on the deck. Well, actually, yeah, that slash maybe if we love our bishop here, but if we decide to go back, it could be this as well. That might set up some sacks, right? For sure. Maybe like that even to get through to H3. Although he'd probably if you move the bishop back, they might go like this or something. But yeah, it might have some sort of defenses to be careful.
But the
On a
A6
certain-
bishop is doing a wonderful job because he got everybody constricted. So therefore, I wouldn't move my A6.
Yes. Yeah, it's
you
an
know.
asset. It's an asset. Why get rid of that asset? On H3?
Exactly.
Yeah, on
Everybody's
H3.
constricted over there. They can't get out. And so now you have to just work with the knight and the queen and the rook.
Yeah, but now let's get to your move. And Nikki, you said there might be the last move you looked at was this one, but really you could just see like positional play, beautiful positional play. So the positional sacrifice, again, it's not the thing in itself, right? It's the whole, the lead up was actually very important, John, and Nikki, as you were talking about the whole game, the lead up is really important here because we understand like it's a continuation of what's been done. So it's not like, oh, first of all, this didn't just magically appear. We have to know how we got here and how you can play great positional chess. Now, in a lot of cases, you might just win this position. It might just sort of play itself where you kind of, like maybe just win the E4 pawn, or maybe you just like, yeah, maybe you get in on H3 or something like, or your knight gets in on H4 or whatever, and you just take advantage of the weaknesses. But this is not going to play itself. The point is you got to do that little extra work, technique
Yeah.
converting into a win. In this case, it's very more violent. More of a, like I said, more of a crescendo, but it's pretty cool. I mean, it's really a beautiful game. I'm glad I think I was just looking at a certain opening and I came across it in my opening search. But yeah, it's a really amazing game because there's a few of them. Yeah, a few blows here. But and Nikki, what were you suggest? I know you said there might be a sacrifice. What move were you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if I could make like some kind of capturing of the E4 or D5 pawn.
And Lynn's on the same page there as a kid. So certainly a candidate move in common was this one. Taking E4. Now it's easy to dismiss it outright. It's like, oh, they have 2 covering. I have 3 on it, but I'd have to take with a rook and give up my exchange. Well, it would be an exchange for a pawn. So we have to look at that move now. As for H5, Lynn, yeah, you looked at, yeah, probably it's too slow, right? It's cool, but it's a cool idea. It's neat, but yeah, like G5, you can reroute your knight, but it's neat, but it's like it's less convincing, right?
Right. So now you have to attack.
Yeah, let's go for it. Let's just we want to try to make this work. So we like the idea. We're like, you know what? Yeah, we're gonna have to lose a point. It's like losing a pawn. Well, let's think about what we would gain, and we have to be really unbiased about it. See, like I said, this it's about you have to be. So in other words, what I was getting at is it's almost like bishop A6 is a sacrifice. You can view it as just as you could view giving up an exchange for something as a sacrifice, but giving up your bishop for their bishop, you're sacrificing something. You really are, because you're giving up, you're getting rid of their really bad, at least for now, ostensibly bad bishop, right? For your bishop that has a future, right? Again, if it can reroute itself or break through. So you're giving up something, which you might not, which is a little uncomfortable. Like, why do you want to do that? It's a great bishop, right? And okay, here, well, we're considering giving up material. So that would, so again, I would just encourage you to, the way I don't, yeah, it's called a sacrifice, but it's kind of like, I don't know what it is. It seems inaccessible, like, or like really difficult to do. Like, oh, I have to, like this notion of, oh yeah, this brilliant exchange sacrifice. It's so, but no, it's just trading something for something else, right?
Well,
So
David,
giving up a
suppose
rook for a pawn and a knight. But what do you gain out of it? What's that?
suppose he just brings his bishop at C3 down to E5, checking the king, pushing the kings back, and then you can start to work your way over more towards the king.
Oh, there's a check also. Now that would be in this. I'm going to use the word sacrifice, I guess, in terms of giving. Well, it's no. Let's go back. Let's go back now to imbalance, because that's ultimately what it is. It's different. I like the Silman way of looking at it. It's different imbalances. So we'd be giving up the bishop pair. The imbalance would be then we'd be playing against the bishops, and we'd be giving up. Well, the bishops helping us to tie things down, giving us dark square control. So we'd be giving that up. We'd be trading it for the knight. So even though it would be a trade, where do you go with it? And some of your dark square pressure would be gone. And interestingly enough, even though they have this space here, well, we have space on the queen side, but we're actually squeezing. We're the ones squeezing them, and they have that little, again, to the extent that D5 gives them and G4, but that's actually weakening. It's like, it's overextended space, right? It's giving us access to their poorest position. And but yeah, if you trade, so Lynn, you can see that if you trade it off, the imbalance is now they have the bishop pair, you lost your strong bishop, and you can't use it to attack them anymore. And they get to cut off some of your attackers. So it's worth looking at.
Yeah,
You can see it doesn't quite help you,
I
right?
see that now, yeah.
Yeah. No, but hey, it's just like looking at H5 and looking at this move as you did, which is actually the move, right? But let's see why this works. We got to look at all of them. But it's so there's so much power right now on E4. So when you take it again, we're giving up in exchange for pawns. So in terms of quote sacrifice, we're sacrificing 1 point in material, right? We can't be, obviously we're not gonna be too materialistic because we're gonna understand the justification positionally. So knight takes. Okay, tell me the whole line after everything gets traded off. And again, another imbalance is that awful bishop. We let them get rid of it, which is very unappealing in a way, right? But we'd have to really prove it's worth it then. But at the very least, we get that pawn in the middle, which is useful because we destroy their center. So what do you guys think at the end of it though? After all that happens, they get rid of they lose the knight, the pawn, and the bishop. We lose a knight and a rook. And our rook takes back on E4. So try to see that, like you can't play it out, right? You have to see that in your head. You have to see that these pieces and you have to evaluate that clearly before you make, it's very tempting in a way, but before you make the decision, what's your evaluation of that? Those are going to be gone, right?
Yeah.
So you're just envisioning the rook, the other rook on E8 would be lifted to E4. That's it. You imagine in your mind's eye, knights, those X's are pieces that have been wiped off the board. So what's your evaluation after the rook arrives at E4? Is it worth it to give up that point in material?
I don't think so.
I think so, no.
You don't think so? Why not?
It just doesn't look like we have a follow-up.
Right.
And that's why it's a positional sacrifice, meaning that it's not.
That's not.
No,
like
it's not a puzzle. It's not a puzzle in the
I
sense.
see. Okay.
It's like white. It's like black to move and make the best move that helps the position most. Not black to play and find a mate or win a piece. Well, black to play and lose material, right? It's reverse logic there. But again, it's black to play and gain a big attack. Black to play and gain. Well, it's not even the attack. Well, it did cascade into an attack on the king because he's exposed, which again makes this all the more tempting. Now, if the pawn were here, then maybe we can still do it, but it would be a little less convincing. But you can see, look at the lights now. And going back to giving up these two for the what would it be? These two for these two. So we're giving up a knight for a knight, cancels out. We give up a rook for a bishop. So again, similar to trading off. Actually, it's even better now because we're losing our rook for the bishop, right? But we keep our bishop. In the other case, we'd have to give up our bishop, which was so powerful. And we gain access to more light squares, which are exacerbated for our opponent by the fact that he played g4.
Yeah, and
Meaning
his
after
pawn is.
these are all accessible, which means our bishop's going to be a monster. And we won we effectively won the e pawn, which means the d pawn is brittle.
Yeah.
And what if we can go scoop that up and mate them in there and
Mhm,
stuff?
mhm,
Yeah,
okay.
mating attack. So Nikki, what else?
Yeah, I was just looking at that. D pawn is gonna be weak and maybe we can like reroute. Well, no, we like the bishop right now, but maybe
Yeah.
attack it somehow.
Yeah, but it's just there. It's just vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because the c pawn's been traded off. Now the e pawn's been traded off. So again, it's important to understand this. Like, it's just, again, like it sounds so fancy, right? Positional sacrifice, exchange sacrifice. I mean, exchange sacrifice are brilliant. Actually, something from India, Anand did at least two, right? Uday, there's a really famous one in books that Anand does, that he's done. That's really instructive, where he just brings a rook to like, it's guarded by two pawns, but then it's I think it's the kind of thing where like a pawn would take back and you get rid of a
Yeah,
strong
against
piece.
Kasparov, right? Against
that?
Kasparov. Was it against Kasparov?
I think it
Kasparov
was. Yeah, there's two. I'm pretty sure there are two like that. There might be another
Yeah.
one like on the B file, and there's another on D file, if I recall. But yeah, he
Yeah,
was.
no,
I mean, I'm
I
sure
know
he
the
did many
game.
famous ones.
That was in 1999. That was the first decisive game of the World Championship, 1995. In game 8, that was the first game that wasn't a draw, and Anand won.
Wait, again, you said against who?
Kasparov.
Oh, so ultimately, oh, you said 95.
Yeah.
Oh, the one that was on the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking with someone about that because that was it's just an aside, but that was the PCA, the Professional Chess Association, that Kasparov founded because FIDE
Yeah.
was corrupt and it still has its issues, but like FIFA, right? All the corruption, and he was very much like anti, opposing the regime and everything in Russia. So, and they had influence and all that. I think there was some deal with Kazakhstan and stuff too. No, it was what was his name? There was the former president. Well, he had like his own like chess colony and stuff. Anyway, was it Kalmykia or something?
That
Anyway,
sounds
that's
right.
another. What's that?
Yeah, that sounds right. Wasn't he
What-
the Fiji water guy or something? Am I getting confused?
The what guy?
Like the guy that had something to do with the Fiji water?
Oh, like the Water Empire or something.
Yeah, I think I
No, I don't
might
know,
just-
but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Anyway, there was a lot of corruption. Yeah, some of the figures. No, I think a guy. No, I think there's like an oil baron and stuff involved. Yeah, it's worth looking into. Anyway, yeah. So he was, because he was opposed to all that, he founded the Professional Chess Association. It's just like he founded another an opposition party in Russia as well. So anyway, that's Kasparov, right? He's what's the word? He's a maverick or whatever you want to call it. He's
Rebel.
what's the word? He's a rebel. Yeah. So he played on top of the World Trade Center. It was like the observation deck, like it was still indoors, I think, but after the first attack on it, right? 95. And that's, you said that features the exchange sacrifice.
Yeah, it had another very nice game. It was featured in Kasparov's 20 Greatest Games. I don't know if you've read that book. It's a pretty famous one.
No, that's
Oh, well,
no.
that was my first chess book.
Oh, really? That's worth looking at. So anyway, a lot of interesting asides there. But yeah, I would look into that though. It's a really interesting match. But yeah, so Anand does this exchange sacrifice too. But so knight takes e4. Knight takes, rook takes. So again, it seemed like it wasn't enough, but that's where positional understanding is so important. But again, this one's a little different too, because you have the additional justification or the imbalance of the king's safety. Clearly, white's king is not that safe. It's very airy over there, right? Drafty. Black's king is nice and tidy, right? Nice and tucked in here. So we have that additional. But even if you didn't have that, let's just say hypothetically the pawn were on g2, you'd still have a nice position. I would still say it's worth it. Maybe you would wait a little bit, like maybe build a little bit more. It's like if all else being equal, if you could do it in like 3 moves after building more. But I mean, we got pretty nice piece placement, right? You've got the pawn for the exchange, so you're down 1 point. You've got the bishop pair, that's an asset here, especially here, wide open lines. You've got the pressure on the, isolated, not in a half open file, but it's isolated, could be attacked, Nikki, as you said. You can pretty much pick it off pretty easily, right? With knight e7 too. So you get 2 pawns then, which I think he does. And you can, even if you can access the king, it would still be pretty good. But now that the king's exposed, I mean, you can see it's becoming overwhelming. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Lindsay H4 now. H5, excuse me, maybe something like that.
Now the H5 move.
Yeah. Maybe not
Possibly,
yet,
yeah,
but
just to chip at it even more.
Mhm.
Yeah, because your rook's already attacking. Yeah, and again, you can always bypass, but then you can like come to E5 and you trade that one off. Then the pawn might be hanging soon. You can sack on E3. You can, but this
My
is
goodness.
those bishops though. You'll see. I mean, now let's see the conclusion of it. But yeah, so I just summed it up right there. What did he gain for the positional exchange sacrifice? Black has gained the bishop pair and light square domination, right? By extension, because he's got rid of the light square bishop, right? And again, the weaknesses with G4, G5, all that, right? F3, which is particularly important to exploit the weaknesses that were created by G4. And obviously by extension, the attack on the king. That's just the cherry on top. But again, even if you didn't have the attack, even if the king were like on A2, it would still be kind of awkward. But even there, it would still, you could still probably justify it. Let me close the door, sorry. Having fun over there with the food. Okay, so Queen E7. And you'll see, okay, now this is really cool. Okay, who can find another sacrifice? Oh, it says it right there, don't look at it. But who can see the
too
next
late. I
sacrifice?
saw it. Sorry.
You
I
saw
wasn't
it? Okay,
here.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, it's in green somehow. I think it's because I have a comment, or maybe, oh, because I put an exclamation mark on it. Wait, did it show up? It didn't show up in the annotation on the board, but I don't have that featured. But yeah, you saw it in green. What was the move, or who else can see it if you didn't already see the answer? What do you guys think is the next sacrifice?
Rook takes C3.
And what? And okay, but more importantly, why is that one justified?
Like you get a bishop and a pawn, and like your queen infiltrates, and you're pretty much overwhelming the opponent. But
You get the bishop and the pawn and the knight.
Oh, the knight's loose. The knight's loose. And you said, and Uday, you said you pretty much overwhelm them.
yeah, look at your pieces; they're all coming in. Like once the knight moves, then you have bishop E4, bishop E5 check. You can get the knight in from F5 F4 whenever you want.
It's just too
Your
much.
queen-
It's just too much. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the queen itself is dominant. And we have one pawn for each. Okay, for each exchange, we have a pawn and a bishop, which is pretty nice. Because the bishop, I mean, look at that. That's a vicious example of a bishop pair. They're just tearing it up. And again, as Uday said, well, you can go bishop E2 to attack F3. To actually obstruct the queen's defense. We like when the queen's on the other side of the board and we can cut them off to help our attack. But yeah, as you said, look at those squares. The knight can start coming in. I mean, they're all weak. Now you really see though, when do the weak squares get exploited? When the lines open up and our pieces swarm, right? So you see all these, and the king itself. What's that?
I was just gonna say, like, bishop E2 is so much better. Of course, I was just looking at bishop D3 immediately, thinking, oh,
Yeah.
it's good, but like such a better move is E2.
No, but this move, it's funny because this happened to me in a game. I think I told you guys about it earlier in the year. Well, the first game that I messed up this year from a bird when I had a winning attack was I was down a piece for 2 pawns. I'm like, oh, okay, I could win an exchange back then. Well, then I'm down, I was just thinking materially. I'm like, well, then I'm not down a piece. I have a rook for 2 pieces and I have 2 pawns. I'm like, nope, but that was bad. I shouldn't have cashed in. I was up a point, but those 2 pieces were way stronger than my rook.
Right.
So in other words, if we're going to go bishop B3 and try to take the rook back, it's like, no, we don't need the material back. We're going to be confident in the compensate. Now, in that game, I gained something like an attack with the pieces coming in, but also a mating attack, right? So actually, well, it wasn't as cool as this game, but yeah, same concepts, mating attack, weak squares, invasion. Well, in that case, I had like my pawns were storming his king, and his king was like on C3, and my pawns were storming him. So yeah, it made no sense to quote cash in, because cashing in would be to maintain the material deficit, or to maintain your other advantages, right? So the imbalances become advantages when you use them well. What's that?
Yeah, that's like the whole point. Like, why give them up? Like, yeah, it's just it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly, because you're going. So it's this, and so again, there's a lot of instructive stuff about positional sacrifices just from this game. But you're going. That's your commitment, right? Not to say that you can't reverse the commitment if you can cash in sometimes. but your commitment was to give up the material in order to gain the positional compensation. So certainly don't give it like taking, like, let's just say hypothetically you're able to take it back later, right? The queen would be away, you take it back. You'd be, let me just mute it. I'm just gonna mute it. Okay, so there's some sound, just unmute later. Okay, so you're gaining an exchange back, but yeah, you're giving up the bishop pair, you're giving up some of your light squared control, giving up the idea, and therefore the idea to be able to like come in and create a mating attack with your bishops, the ability, as
Yeah,
Uday said,
it would be
to
a mess
chase
if you
away
got
the
rid of it.
knight with your strong bishop e2, which is the next move, and then bring your bishop here and go for your mating attack, and it's too much, right? Yeah. Oh, Nikki, what's that?
What's that?
Oh, Nikki, you said something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you got rid of that bishop, it'd be a hot mess. Like it would be like all for nothing almost.
I would leave the
Yeah.
bishops alone, and I would bring
Yeah.
my knight up to F4, and then have
Love
the
it.
queen to take the white knight. I mean, I would work on the mating attack at that point, because if the knight goes up to F4, then I don't know what white's gonna do if he moves his knight.
Well, in conjunction with bishop e2, because bishop e2 is going to cut off the queen, simultaneously threatening the knight, simultaneously allowing bishop e5, right? So it's too much, and knight f4. If you
Yeah.
although actually, I'm not sure when it happened, but even if you don't even need it yet, because you might want to not obstruct your check.
So
But
you're saying bring A6 over to E2?
yeah, that's what he did next, because, and again, this is the follow through. For interestingly, we say a sacrifice in the follow through, but really the second sacrifice was the beginning of his follow through of the first sacrifice, right? Because giving up both exchanges fully justified the initial sacrifice.
Yeah.
And because you got both, it's pretty cool. I mean, you got, and again, you say, oh, I gave up 2 rooks. The rooks were nice, but they weren't, here's the thing though, they weren't enough in themselves. And well, he really wanted to collapse e4. There was no other way to collapse e4 apart from the exchange sacrifice.
Right,
So
right.
everything just, it's like he had to, but it also was really cool. So
Yeah,
he
it's such
was
a deep
forced to do something. He was
understanding of
forced to
the
do something
position.
amazing. Was that?
Yeah, it's just such a deep understanding of the position. Like it's just super cool.
But it's also, yeah, it's super tempting. But the deep understanding was also like how he got there, right?
Yeah.
But then, yeah, but knowing, you can fearlessly, I don't think it was a blitz game either. I'm pretty sure it was a long game. We'll look it up. Yeah, I'll try to find it. Maybe Uday, if you're interested. So I said key moment to evaluate. What is, now I said again, what is he achieved after the second exchange sack? And things we've already talked about in the comment. I said, compensation, you want to envision before you make the sack, what are you going to get? Even if you don't see all the complications, you want to gain a good sense of what of the sort of exchange, what you're getting for the exchange. Oh, thanks. You're getting, okay, you've given up material. What did you gain? Okay, you've given up 2 points for each exchange, 1 pawn, right? That's your material. 2 pawns for the exchange, right? So 2 points down. It's almost like you're down 1 exchange, right? Material, but you've given up material. You got space, time, as in you get like free moves coming in, and they have to respond. So initiative with that. You got weaknesses, and along with that, king side attack. Just again, just that's gravy, right? But that's just going to help you finish, really. But even if you didn't have that, it'd still be worth it, right? Almost certainly. Material is only one currency in chess and should be handled agnostically, as it is no deity. Okay, anyway, I was getting a little poetic there, attempting to. But no, but yeah, but it's true though, because people they do. It's like people worship money, right? But it's material. It's so we're getting a little spiritual in chess, right? But yeah, but it's just, point is, it's a mind over matter situation, right? So again, money's not God, just as it's not a God, just as material in chess. Yeah, but Hunter, no, it's true though, because it is something that people can cling to, this notion of, oh, I don't want to lose material, especially not, as we saw earlier. It's like, well, we know we don't like to give up material for nothing, or we'd have to prove it. But hey, keep in mind, it's only a point, and it's only another point. But for each one, we got 2 bishops and 2 pawns for 2 rooks. Just that in itself is not that big of a deal materially, right? But when you combine everything, it's overwhelming to the extent that it's completely won. That's just completely won. And he collapses quickly. Okay, he tries queen f5, and he actually comes back. Well, now the queen is almost trapped. She can check you. You just move away, but she's actually been decoyed, right? bishop e5. Now that's interesting. So he's actually giving up. There you go again. He's giving up something. Such a strong bishop. He's willing to give it up for the knight. Well, the thing is, it's now we have, this is no longer positional. Again, it's not positional to give up your beautiful bishop, right? Well, you're getting rid of a knight, which allows, what was the line? It was queen takes check, rook g3, queen e2 check. Well, now we're forking those two. Yeah, there's no way to defend that because a king back, you still take on f1. So, oh, I think Leia had to go. Yeah, so we have, yeah, and again, I just went into, but again, just the positional features. So if you guys want to look at it, but again, weak squares, comparative. Now we're really getting into the king. But I mean, that's self-explanatory now. Now it's purely a king side attack, right? It ended up, but really G4 was responsible for that. He hastened his demise with G4 and just really made it worth it for him to sack the two exchanges. But I like the idea that it's a double exchange sack. And then he resigns, kind of like King H7, although somehow he preferred, well, he would have been giving him the F pawn. Oh, for sure he preferred that, because if he gives him the F pawn, it helps him defend, right? So it's very important to play knight F8, and then he resigns because there's no defense of the knight. I don't think so. Again, if king up, you can just check them. And then I gave the line rook f2, bishop takes, wait, what? Oh, after, for example, after if king up. And then you have this check, and then it gets pinned, and then if he goes here, he gets pinned. And then you can take bishop takes f3 with mate, because yeah, he's covering everything, and the rook can't take. Pretty cool, huh? So a
Yeah,
beautiful
it's a great
finish
game.
there. Yeah, so that's worth spending some time on. But the other ones, yeah, we'll focus a little more so we can get 3 in today. In the next half an hour, we can look at 2 more, hopefully. But yeah, it's a really beautiful game. So I don't know, I don't know how famous the game is. I think it should be more famous. But it's kind of like I was saying about the Carlsen game. He has a very similar game. I'm pretty sure it was against Caruana. And Uday, yeah, Uday, you're good at this stuff. Maybe what was it from? Was it Sinkfield? No, I think it may have been just a year ago. I don't know. Nowadays, time gets a little warped coming out of or in the pandemic in particular. But it was some time. I think it was coming. Yeah, it was somewhere in the pandemic, maybe 21. So C5, but it was some. Yeah, it was an E4 E5 opening, pretty similar to this structure, and he ended up taking the pawn on. In that case, I think he took on D4 though, so it morphed into something else where it just blasted open. But yeah, you know, so we have this Benoni type structure, and really, yeah, he's just. I'm sure the computer would say he's better now. Let's see what the value. I'm sure it's like significantly better. Computer says, nope, it doesn't think so. Interesting. So it says it's about even. So black is fine, but it doesn't. Okay, where does it think that black is doing better? Let's guess. I don't know. I'd think so. I would think that he's doing better here. Let's see. Now, yeah, now it's saying he's on like a point up. Yeah. So something happened, some inaccuracy occurred. See, it must have been this move, really. It liked knight h5 to f4. Oh, it doesn't like a4, fixing the pawn. Interesting. That's the move that it thinks turns the game effectively in black's favor. So it wants him to just take, and then bishop d3. So slight difference, maybe, I don't even know. The computer sees something there, but it doesn't, to me, it doesn't seem like a, oh yeah, for sure. No, it's because it would be an A pawn for a C pawn if he takes. By bypassing, he's just letting black sit there with his nice pawn chain. He would have broken up his pawn chain and therefore gained access to d4. So it would have given him a little bit, right? For white, it would have certainly taken away some of this dark square control, but he just let him kind of sit there with impunity, and he just does whatever he wants. And then he gets this beautiful position and he exploits it. First exchange sack, everything we talked about. And then the second one, Uday, as you said, it's just sinking your queen in there, in addition to all the weaknesses, the bishop pair, the exposed king. And then, yeah, and I'm sure it's like -5 or something at this point, -6 point something, right? It's just a winning position because you're just coming in. Oh, that's just another example of mate. Yeah, he was on 3 moves earlier, but yeah, you can also mate him like that. Rook f2, bishop takes mate, king h1, queen mate, because the bishop's pinned. The bishop's pinning the knight. Pretty cool, huh? That's how it would finish. So he resigned because literally it was mate in 2 moves. So you guys have any questions about that one?
No, that was very interesting. He got the win, and it wasn't tactical at all. He had to really maneuver a lot.
Yeah, and that's the positional element. But the thing is, like, for example, I like Reshevsky a lot because Reshevsky was a deeply positional player, but he was also dynamic. And you have to, the way I view it is you have to understand the marriage of tactical play and positional play, the way in which they merge. They're always merging in some way.
Yeah.
So as Fisher said, tactics flow from a superior position. In other words, positional advantage. Gain a better position. It's positional advantage. What is a better position? But as I said, also the imbalances, they're not advantages yet. Right, like exchange sack, that's giving up, let's say 2 points. In this case, it was a point because you gain a pawn, which is very useful, right? So it's not, yeah, pawn sack, you're losing a pawn. Here, actually gain a pawn, you gain 2, so you have these pawns rolling. But at first, it's like, oh, you're down a point. That's not, so it's not to anyone's advantage yet. Oh, white's up material. It's not clear that he's, but if white can hang on, well, that's an advantage now. Right, that should be an advantage because now you're just up in exchange, or maybe exchange for a pawn in the end game, which is often winning, but he didn't. Right, so ultimately it was black's imbalances of everything we talked about, the weak squares, the bishop pair, and all that, which ended up favoring him. So it's a battle, it's a battle of ideas, and just because you do the exchange stack doesn't mean you're all knowing, right? You just kind of have to use your intuition, right? Determine what's best. Oh, great! It says there's haze in the weather. Hopefully not more smoke coming over.
Oh my goodness, that was so nuts.
Yeah.
It is. I can see it from my window here. I was just thinking, look, I see smoke out there.
Oh no, it's back. Yeah, because what they were saying on the weather yesterday, Matthew Capucci, if you're listening from NPR, he was saying that that it's higher up now, but I guess it decided to drop again.
Well, it's windy outside, so the wind is shifting it around.
All right. Hopefully you think of blow it away, but I guess not. Now it's blowing it towards us. Okay, so now the second one is to squat. Now this is a great, I mean, you could spend a day studying this game because, to try to understand AlphaZero. And I'd reference Game Changer again. Have you, who's read? Has anyone read Game Changer?
Is this the
Game Changer? We've talked about this a bit. I don't know, you guys recall that, or have you read it?
No, it's on my list though. Is this like the
you have to read it. You have to read it. I'm pretty sure Carlson read it because you saw him sacking a lot more pawns after AlphaZero's match. But it's an intuitive, and it uses a neural network. And I heard it described in a very strange way, where it's like screens, I guess so. But from this book, it says it's like it's mimicking the neurons in the brain, the connections, and in other words, it comes up with a probabilistic understanding of a position as opposed to plus 0.7. It's like there's a 58% chance that white wins. So it's rougher. So in this line, there's a 58% chance, and it's looking at strings of lines leading to final positions or snapshots of what would lead to at the end, at least at some juncture in that line, not the end of it, but at the end of some key juncture, like at the end of the exchange stack line, it evaluates that, but in a more probabilistic and intuitive way. It has spatial awareness more, which computers didn't really have before that. Maybe it understands, oh, I should win a file, but the spatial awareness is far deeper. So anyway, you're going to see that when you study this book. If you can look at the 2017 match. It has 10. It just features the chessgames.com. I think they released 10 wins, which may have been the only wins. No, there may be like 17 wins, and the rest were draws. So only AlphaZero won in that first match. And then Stockfish became stronger, and they put in a neural network in Stockfish too. They're like, oh, this works. let's use that. And it learned from the games, obviously. But yeah, studying this, it's very deep. And again, here's a computer teaching us about positional understanding, which was unheard of in the 90s, basically, when Kasparov obviously it was an amazing calculator, but Kasparov had deeper positional understanding, and he beat it in 94 and 95, right? And then he was beating it the next year, even though he lost the match. Like he won 1 or 2 matches. I think he won 2 games or at least 1 game and drew some. So I mean, he's still doing well, but then ultimately by a few years later, then it just, then I guess they gained better positional understanding, and then the culminating in the neural network, machine learning, super powered computers. But we can certainly, it's interesting that we can actually learn from these computers. Well, yeah, a lot of them. Now you have like Leela, AlphaZero, and Leela and AlphaZero. I think they're
Is this a
open.
king e3 game?
What's that?
Is this a game in which AlphaZero goes king e3?
Maybe, yeah. And I think this is the one. Don't tell us everything yet, though. So
No,
anyway,
I'm just
really
guessing
deep
because I was
positional
gonna-
understanding. A squash through the sacrifice. Squashing counterplay is something of value. Creating a bind is something of value, and creating a protect pass pawn. What's that, Uday?
Nothing.
You sure? But yeah, you'll see. You can tell us when we get there. So d4, e6, e4. So it transposes into a French, plays e4, you get d5 as if he had played e4, it doesn't make a difference. Knight c3, knight f6, so the classical French, as opposed to bishop b4. The Winawer variation, the classical, you push. And this is the Steinitz variation, right? f4. Of course, they strike like French, you should strike. Generally speaking, there are some interesting lines where you don't, like Petrosian's done that. Generally, you should strike. Pawn chain, knight f3 takes immediately. Now this is, so the way it handles the French, just like the way it handled the Queen's Indian with the white side, is very interesting. Actually, it only won with white, I think, in the first match, and it drew with black. But it's shown some interesting innovations. I think, yeah, the second match more so from the black side too. But yeah, this is really cool idea. So bishop b4 check, it trades it off, offers the trade, goes back. That's the bad bishop, right? Technically, that's the bad. Black's bad bishop is c8. That's the problem bishop in the French, Slav often, right? The pawns are blocking it. This is the good bishop. So he preserves it. It preserves it. b4. Grabbing more dark squares and then just takes it back. Now this is no, by the way, if the exchange had happened, then d6 would be accessible. That would be pretty dangerous. Knights coming in, hitting f7 and all that stuff. So it wants to hold on to d6, but then grabbing dark squares, there's a positional element. Now it weakens, so imbalance though, grabbing dark squares, but giving up c3 is weak, right? c4 is weak. It didn't ultimately matter, but that isn't, we don't know for sure if that's going to help black or not. That is something in black's. That's an imbalance. Does it ultimately give black an advantage there? It didn't, but the knight got in to c4, right? But it's just kind of betting that that its imbalances are going to favor it more. Like you have the d4 square, dark square control. It can't contest the knight. Can't go bishop c5 anymore, right? So knight c6, grab the dark squares more. Okay, let's strike at the dark squares, a5, b5. So we're shifting, we're giving up that c5 square, but we're gaining something else. Well, I mean, you kind of have to, you can't just ignore that, right? a3 looks like under a lot of pressure. So it bypasses, takes away the tension, gains space. Now it decides to take back. Well, the thing is, if you take with the knight, then they're going to strike, you're going to get on c5 and strike. So it's like, okay, let's take with the pawn and let's cover c5. But now you see, what is the main advantage? Well, it might become an advantage, might not. It does. But what is the main imbalance in terms of, yeah, I'm not gonna say what, but what do you think is the main imbalance so far, or imbalances that have already been generated out of the opening, halfway through the opening, basically?
It looks like a lot of weak squares
For both sides or for white?
for white.
Yeah, white has weak squares. Well, typical in French, the d4 pawn is, the d4 square is weak, and therefore the pawn which resides on it's weak. Now the knight would rather be on c6 to attack it, or f5. That knight is not getting there anytime. It's going to be really impractical for it to reach c6. I mean, that's impossible as long as the pawn stays here. Can't get to f5 anytime soon. If it does, you could play g4 or something. I mean, that would be quite a trek to get to f5. In the meantime, white's going to get initiative. Now, pawn structured chess covers the C file. Do you guys know Pawn Structure Chess by Soltis?
No.
Really good books. I recommend Game Changer and Pawn Structured Chess. Now, if you want to learn about any opening, it's not just the opening, it's the structure. As I talked about, Benoni structures. I think it covers that. So we saw a Benoni structure come out of the other opening. That's why I like Chess 960 too, because it can morph into any structure. So that's a huge part of Chess Master. What's understanding pawn structure, but then you have, and then a shortcut is like, okay, I know the French structure, but you're not always going to get French structure. Maybe it's a pawn chain here. Maybe it's like in a King's Indian, the other on the light square pawn chain. But anyway, in these scenarios, you have the pressure on d4 and you have the C file contending to the C file. So in some cases, he talks about how white can actually do it. It can control it, even though it's kind of black's domain in many cases, because you get that quick, bishop out, hopefully activating the bishop like in the other game, like Caruana did. You get to b5. You're not getting b5 after a4. That bishop's going to be hemmed in. That's what I'm saying here. Squash the counterplay and forge a bind. Now we'll see where the protected path pawn comes into play. That's later. That's part of the finish. But yeah, it's just restriction. The knight's bad. The bishop's bad. Bishop e7 maybe, but if it wants to come in, you trade off your bad bishop for it, right? So it's kind of getting what it wants in many ways. And again, and it utilizes the c file first, largely because black doesn't really finish its development. And if the castles is like, I don't want to walk into some bishop sack on h7, right? Some build up over there with the g and the h pawns, right? Looks really dangerous. So, yeah. So this is the understanding. What's that?
That's why I had to start playing the Sicilian.
Because of this getting squeezed.
Yeah, this kind of thing. Like I just,
I'll tell you though, it's if I play the French, I would actually consider this offbeat thing, just as an aside. Petrosian has done this. If you look at Petrosian's French game, so it's this thing where you go b6 and bishop a6 usually. Like maybe it's b6, c6, a5. The bishop trades off early. And then it's kind of like in a Karjakin where the bishop comes out and white trades it off. But by getting rid of that light squared bishop, it really squashes, it kind of extinguishes a lot of white's attacking chances. And obviously it removes your bad bishop, which makes your life a lot easier. So look into those weird lines.
Okay.
Again, I'm interested in the thing about the French that I don't like is they're like boring lines, like the exchange variation. At least in the Karjakin, it creates some imbalance because c6 takes back as opposed to, the e-pawn trades and white's e-pawn takes back, and symmetry. I don't like symmetry much. It's harder to play for an advantage.
Yeah.
Like Sicilian, imbalance immediately, black plays for a win, right? Generally speaking. Anyway, here, highly imbalanced pawn structure. Yes, there are weaknesses on the c file. What I'm getting at though is white's going to put pressure on the c file first. And again, this is tied to the king's safety because black is, well, the computer effectively is intimidating from castling because it sees lines it doesn't like, where it's stuck, right? So knight b6, okay, why not? Let's get our knight on c4. If I recall, there was some time constraint too. If I recall, I'd have to look into it, but I think it was the first match was like short time, so pretty quick. So I had to come up with this, and AlphaZero with its Monte Carlo algorithm and its neural network is just better at finding moves quickly. So Stockfish just maybe that was part of it too. But it decides to activate the knight. But really, I mean, it should have seen that, right? The bishop just missed that basically. The bishop is just not getting out, and it just ignores this. And yeah, it's a dubious because it's the bad bishop. The knight was doing well, right? Maybe just play bishop d7, rook c8, secure the knight. But now we have the thing, Uday, as you said, the king comes to e3 because it just secures the dark squares. It's hiding behind its pawns, and it's out of the way. So it goes up to the third story, right? Going on the third floor. But you allow the pieces to maneuver. You can play like g4 on the king's side without, being in the way and being exposed.
Baby is there. That's so funny.
It's pretty cool, right?
Yes.
But yeah, it's a computer, so a human might not see that. But now you study, like the human can study that and be like, oh, I like that idea. I'm gonna use that.
Yeah, you have to study it very well though. This is a bring that king out like that.
Well, hey, it helps you control the dark squares.
Yeah, it does.
The king is defending the dark squares. But the other thing is that it actually, objectively speaking, it's actually the safest place for the king because black is not touching the king.
Right.
But again, it's going to play g4 and attack. Well, the natural thing to do is to play for f5. So if the king's on, first of all, it's in the way. Second of all, actually, it's going to become exposed anyway with the h5 and stuff, trying to open up the line. So it may as well be on e3. We'll figure it out later. I mean, it has to move more later, but okay, b6, just hemming in the bishop more, just locking things in. Again, b6 is technically weak, a4 is technically weak. The question is who's accessible. So you got g4 going. h5 is a good move. You should strike. Queen g1, a really interesting move. A lot of people would play h3 and just take back and keep, challenge the h file and keep your pawns fluid. But it understands that can go on the g file. Okay, let's get to the sacrifice now. So you understand positionally how white's doing. F5 is still possible. King side play. All this king side stuff is coming. Plus the bishops the bishop on d7 is contained. The king hasn't castled, so the rook is like, yeah, it's actually a deep idea because if it had gone h3, and traded pawns. And then the rook gets to trade off. It's uncompromising and saying, no, I'm not letting your rook gets to sit on h8 and look kind of nice on the h file, but it's not getting to come in to the c file. And it actually wins largely because of the c file, but like Capablanca, it's swinging between two sides. So there's the Perugia game in a Karjakin, I think, something similar structure, where he's playing on the c file, but he swings. So it's like that, but typically Capablanca would do that. There's the c file. He can go to c7. Just get, well, he just
Yeah,
goes.
let's just make it C7.
Yeah, it's gonna get booted, I guess, but it ends up coming. It probably doesn't make a huge difference. Okay, we'll just take, but yeah, now we saw, you know, the prelude kind of, now we have this dominating position. It outplayed its opponent. Complete bind, right?
Yeah. What-
Yeah, black
what
just
God
can't
James
do
Black
any-
gonna do.
Yeah, I guess it can only rook c8 and trade off the bishop, but wait, I think it did that. But then the rook can come into c6. So it doesn't help that much. But now the bishop goes to b7. And if the rook takes b6, it'll get trapped after king c7. So it'll be an exchange stack, but no need in this case. Not this case, because the c file is very strong, so it determines that. But now the bishop went to b7, it's totally hemmed in. So it comes back to c2. g5, why not? And here comes the sack. Brilliant move. Okay, I
Bam.
already showed you the move, but it's more like, let's understand. Well, interesting. It seems like it's purely tactical. There is a tactic behind it if the pawn takes back, but it's also, but when the pawn doesn't take back, it's deeply strategic because it doesn't lead to a mate. There are lines where the king gets hunted. That's the thing. So it's kind of like the Caruana. No, it's different though, because in the Caruana game, ultimately it does lead to a kingside attack. In this one, it doesn't. But basically, black has to give up so much to stave off mate. But interestingly, it's not material, it's more structural, and it's deeply positional. But so again, combining tactics, calculation with deep positional understanding, ultimately endgame understanding. It's pretty great. Well, and of course, it can calculate so far to know the endgame works. But as a human, you have to really have the intuitive understanding.
Yeah.
But first of all, why does this directly work? What if the pawn just takes back the bishop on g6?
Queen e6.
Queen e6, that's is it leading to mate? It looks bad. So you have this vicious, well, you're getting two pawns. We have 6 for 4. But yeah, more importantly, the king is very exposed. Well, b6 hanging, right?
Or maybe knight or something.
No, that's mate. That's just mate. See,
Oh, okay. Sorry.
see, where's the mate? Yeah, you
Oh,
don't,
that's cool.
where's the mate?
If only I could think like a computer.
Oh my God. me too.
But you know, like if you look at this, you can see that f pawn's overloaded, right?
Right.
If you start looking, you're looking at knight takes, bishop takes, you look at it, it's like, oh yeah, I get to come in. It takes this one, that's where it gets trickier. And it covers e6 too. But it gets rid of the knight, which attacks it. Knight guards, but yeah, after this one, it just swings over. Where's the mate? Just, you know, for calculation purposes.
A c7, queen c7.
Yeah, exactly, because you cover d8, the knight covers e6, bishop's in the, well, it doesn't make a difference, queen's in the way. Mate, okay. So that doesn't work. So the bishop takes the knight.
Yeah, he has
But
to.
after all that's done, okay, let's talk about the imbalances again. What are the imbalances in this position? Now it's already becoming advantageous for white, but clearly there's a material deficit. Yeah, we're down a piece for some pawns. Again, only one pawn. Okay, there's that. Now, what are you gaining in return in terms of the imbalances?
Well, his king is terribly weak.
Yep, exposed king
Uh-huh.
again. Hard to reach it right now, but it is weak.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's long-term weak, long-term. Our king looks pretty safe on e3 still. What else? That's an imbalance, king safety, relative king safety.
Weak g pawn.
Well,
G pawn's weak, true.
the pawns can't really do anything. They can't advance really too much.
The black pawns.
The white pawns.
Well, at
they,
least white can move pawns, right?
yeah, yeah.
Black can't even move pawns, but yeah,
black.
it's hard to, yeah, true. It's hard to advance. Well, it does.
Right.
It does, which is the brilliant. That's why it's so brilliant, because it follows through.
Black can't move and white can move, but it's gonna start an attack.
White has more mobility though, right? Like c file control.
Mm-hmm.
dangerous on the C file. Black has the H file, half open H file, maybe rook
Mhm.
H5, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, white's gonna get there first.
Mhm.
Yeah, king safety, weak pawns, weak and rigid pawns. White's
Mm-hmm.
pawns, I mean, yeah, maybe the H pawn's weak. Well, you know, they're weak too, but it's all about accessibility. Like the A pawn's weak, the D pawn's weak. All of them are weak, right? Except for the E pawn. They can all be, but again, like if black had like doubled up on the H file or the F file, like maybe black can pick up a pawn, but not here. How about all the pieces, the piece activity?
Well, the bishop can't do too much.
No, the bishop is hemmed in
Yeah.
almost permanently. Well, it can
Right.
it's like in a Dutch, sometimes the bishop will be on C8 and wiggle its way over. Try to get to H5, well, not here. The G pawn might go G5, the bishop would try to wiggle its way. I mean, it can get to F7. It can get to F7, wiggle around, but it can't do much, maybe eventually, but it'll take it kind of like with the knight that was on D7 and couldn't make it anywhere. Never got it.
The
Right.
queen is kind of overloaded too because she's protecting 3 pieces.
Yeah, it does become overloaded, exactly. Have to watch out for C7 later if the queen's going to swarm around, swing around and swarm the queen side. So you can see that this C file becomes attack part of your king side, not king side, but part of the attack on the king in the center, as well as just positional pressure. So it's positional pressure, and again, you get to put pressure on the king to boot, right? But the bishop is really a problem. So even so, this is the brilliant thing. Even though black is up a bishop for a pawn, they're completely lost, basically. Well, after the follow through here, brilliant
Yeah,
follow.
that's what I'm trying to figure out. I do not know what the
I
plan is
know,
here.
right?
I just can't find it. Oh my God.
Breakthrough.
Yeah, I knew it was that one. That's what that breaks it up. That starts to, yeah, sacrifices. I mean, capture
Holy crap.
stuff. Yeah.
Another sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, this is a pseudo sacrifice. The bishop being down a bishop, it's down a bishop, right? That's not coming back, but it doesn't matter because the bishop is like a tall pawn, right?
Yes,
On
big
B7.
bump.
But it's all about, you know, being uncompromised. And I'm trying to get in there. Oh, and there's also queen G7 check stuff. Queen G7 check possibilities to skewer the king and the bishop. And the queen can't block, as you said, the queen's overloaded, Lynn. And Lynn, you were trying to make the pawns. You're like, oh, white's pawns can't move. Well, now it did. But
Yeah, that was
it's
the one I
very
was
deep.
looking
It's
at,
very
too.
deep. It doesn't look like it. What's that?
That was the only one I was looking at that could actually bring about some, action.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
consider
The
that
H
at all.
pawn rook just takes probably, but this is the only one that could do something. You just have to verify, kind of like with giving up the bishop. But the thing is giving up, well, to see that, if the pawn takes, but this is actually the continuation of that move, that you're going to demolish the pawns, you begin to demolish them. This is the conclusion. You're actually giving up your F pawn. They don't take it. And then you end up pushing and
Oh
getting,
my
there's your
God.
protected pass pawn, but you can't do anything because, well, we'll look at, there's a tactical justification for everything. But after F5.
Well,
If-
okay,
so
so
if-
if he takes with the E pawn. oh,
Okay,
I'm
if he
sorry,
takes,
I was
let's
looking
look at
that one
both.
first.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. If he takes the E pawn, Nikki, then what is so, again, Lynn's concept of the overloaded queen is really critical. So what would you do next?
What the heck? I guess queen F6 or something?
Yeah, because she can't move, right? Away, she can't really challenge the queen.
Right.
Oh, okay.
No, it's
okay.
effectively a fork. It's a fork. No, I mean, you're not, it's like a de facto, well, it's more like an attack on D6 and an overloading of the queen. So it's like de facto attacking it's attacking the rook. No, it's putting pressure on the rook, but not threatening to win it just yet. But it's threatening to win it if the queen does something. So that's why she's overloaded, right?
Right.
So you can't cover D6, game over. Yeah, just up an now we're up in exchange. And we're gonna win. Queen B8 and stuff.
Yep.
Okay,
Now if pawn takes, well, that's direct also. What happens?
same thing. Okay, so then just,
Queen to G7.
Right, that one's more direct even. Because you have a check. Yeah, same thing, Nikki, right? But with a check, same concept with a check.
Huh.
Oh, that's even better.
yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, everything's falling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And now E6 is falling. I mean, if you really want to, you can take H8, but same thing, but you may as well.
Played
like
rook C7.
What's that?
Couldn't you have played rook C7 even when the D pawn took?
In this line?
Yeah, instead of taking the rook, you will play queen c7.
Wait, in this line?
Yeah, rook c7.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, in which case you might, oh, I wonder if it makes any difference. The only difference here is that is just which pawn took. So maybe there's a nuance there. Probably doesn't really matter. You can win the exchange. You can do this. Does it make a difference really? I don't think. Oh, interestingly, in this line, you don't get to take the e pawn, right? Because in the other line, you get to pick up the. I mean, it's a slight difference. But yeah, in either case, I think. Let's see what the computer thinks real quick. What does Stockfish think about how it lost? It wants to now that it's better than it was. I mean, and this is probably based on analysis that it's done as well, and it's reanalyzing it. Interesting. But yeah, this is plus 12. If you take the rook, this is plus 7. Now, what about the other line? Let's just see real quick. That's interesting. If it takes here, check. No, yeah, it still just wants to take the rook. So mate in 15, whereas this one is just like advantage. No, it's not a mate anymore. It's plus 11. Okay, plus 12. This one's plus 7, plus 8. Maybe slightly more than the other one. I don't know.
Yeah.
In any case, I'd kind of rather just take a free rook and be up. I don't know. Being up a queen. Well, the thing is, you're up a queen exchange, but it's kind of like, again, it's kind of like you're up a rook again. It's kind of like you're up a rook because that bishop doesn't really count, and you're still going to go for the mate. Oh, there's like some annoyance. No, it still says mate coming in 13 moves. Yeah, so I like taking that because your opponent just has nothing. Oh, they have f4 check. It's not going to do anything. Anyway, they didn't take because of these reasons, and saying plus 1.6, but yeah, saying huge compensation for the piece. But then you get the comes here. So for the same reasons, you can't take because the rook is still loose, right? So they come here to cover, and then just f6, very strong move. And now white has the bind. And then the rest of it's just pretty direct. Well, like a little bit of maneuvering. But then the queen is coming. Now, fascinating that they're of course preparing this, allowing for the queen trade. But you have to. This is where the deep endgame understanding comes in. But again, that bishop is just out of place. So let's assess the endgame. So this is what it saw probably when it did. It was either intuitive or pure calculation, but it's pretty direct actually. Seeing that, okay, you can't take. Well, at least it saw something along the lines of, yeah, it's not that hard to see, I think. Well, it does like a little waiting move, but it's something along the lines of this, right? So it saw that, I imagine. And and if you're going to do that with king d2, it's almost like it's nasty, right? It's almost like it's like doing a waiting move, and it's provoking this. It's like it's like, I know better, and I want you to be tempted to trade queens because now that you're making a pin. But why does this win? Yeah, it's funny. My students, like when we first looked at it back in like 2017, he's like, this thing is sadistic. Machine is sadistic the way it plays. I mean, it understood the power of waiting moves, but like it would do some, it's cat and mousing its opponent. So you could say a human's being sadistic too, but it's helping your opponent to collapse, at least a human, by making them like run out of options. Okay, so what now? Why is this winning? How do you go about, what's a winning plan? Well, first of all, you have the protected pass pawn and the bad bishop, right? But how do you actually go about winning this?
I think,
in terms of planning, not like the moves themselves, but general concepts. Right?
well, is this where you would want to move the king? Bring the king into some action?
Yep, exactly. Where's a good place based on what's just happened with the exchanges? Now, what's the follow-up land with the king?
Maybe I'm not sure.
Okay, why don't you guys feed off that? Good idea. What do you guys think?
Maybe heading up the dark squares, like up the diagonal.
This way?
Yes.
Yeah, that's one way. Although it finds a new way, it finds another way to carve in. What's another way?
I was thinking that he would move over to attack before.
Right, since the b pawn is,
Yeah,
you can take it with the rook, but then there's no clear follow-up. If you imagine the queen here, you can play, what it does is it then brings the rook to the a file, trades it off. So the rook invades on the a file, then the king comes in that way, Nikki.
Okay.
Because it can take that pawn. Now, I guess if you go this way, you give them time for maybe G5, although G5 could be met by a pin with Rook G1, which is kind of what happens at some point. Probably both are winning. And then again, you could kind of cat and mouse then be like, oh, just kidding. Probably doesn't really matter. But it's just probably finding the most efficient route. But what black can't do it, they're petrified here. So you know, Zugzwang territory, when your opponent runs out of moves, you're getting close to a Zugzwang. Oh, it's threatening H5, probably, or even Rook G5. Hit it, and then but if you play H5
Actually-
here, you could keep pushing your pawns probably. And you also keep an eye on them too. Would I say something?
Yeah, it's not actually only threatening H5. H5, black can go G5. It's actually stopping G5 forever.
Yeah, stopping G5. Right. Well, I was looking at, you know, if they play G5, you still have Rook G1 anyway, but then they go G4 and you can push. But I think, but this is, yeah, you have this idea too. But
Yeah.
there are a few ideas, but yeah, if you get this in, even if they get there, but I think that's winning. Now, Rook H8, I think you can you just take, they take, check, and then push. Yeah, you have the idea of checking and then pushing and you get a queen. At least win the exchange. I mean, if you win the exchange, it's over. I mean, Rook against this bishop, no chance. It's a nothing bishop. So I said amazing. Okay, the analysis here after assessing this, amazingly, AlphaZero even has the advantage in the endgame with the piece down. But look at that bad bishop on B7, which is hemmed in by its own pawns, of course. Yeah, and then we see this. But the reason that White's winning is because of the pawn structure then. So regardless of whether the bishop's there or not, you have to have a superior structure to win this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything better to do, so it just chucks the pawn forward, and there we go, Nikki, right? Throwing the
I
pawn.
was just laughing. I was like, chuck the pawn.
Just throw it into the fire, basically. Okay, so takes bishop d7, king b4. So now we have our a5, but interestingly, it shifts the rook back. I think g5 happens, but it's kind of slow. There's your plan by getting so you're simultaneously doing three things. When you play a5, you're opening the a file, you're creating a passed pawn on b5, and you're getting rid of the b pawn to infiltrate with your king to d6. Maybe even sack the b pawn, because then the rook can go b1 and come to b8 or something. Probably that works also. And you have mating threat / skewer threat / f7. And if you win e6, it's just over because you have two connected, protected passed pawns. So yeah, pretty nice. Yeah, it's really nasty. It's beautiful.
Sadistic.
Beautiful, yeah, it's sadistic, but it's really beautiful. Really it's nasty. Well, it's nasty for Stockfish. It's beautiful for What's that?
It's really cool. It may be sadistic, but it's cool because it gives us an idea of how we can program our brains.
Right. The computer programs itself through machine learning, but now we can program our brains based on that. So it's kind of a little give and take, because it programmed itself to think more like a human does in chess, which might be closer to the truth of what arrives at a win in chess, therefore the logic of the game, but it does so in a super powered way. Ways that we can just never fathom, right? Because that's the strength of the computer. It doesn't matter. We could look at so many moves, but the key is that it can evaluate. There's one thing you're not gonna, because I mean the thing about chess is you arrive at these murky situations. Sometimes it's like, oh, plus 0.2 doesn't lead to a mate, right? It leads to like a lot of maneuvers and stuff. Maybe if you look if you look at like a million moves, but still you'd have to evaluate properly because of this sort of murkiness. And unless it's perfect, but unless it was like, okay, let's say hypothetically as a thought experiment, if it had unlimited computing power and unlimited time, maybe every line could be worked out to either a draw or a checkmate for one side. But that's not how it works in practice, because in chess, like this is more clear. Probably now it sees a win. It says +5, which is basically, winning position. And it's not calculating to mate just yet. Maybe if you give it more time, it will, right? But yeah, there are situations that are far murkier, like bishop versus knight, right? It's not clear that that'll lead to a mate, It's too many variables. So a5, but that's where that's why intuition's important, right? The neural network. So, but super powered. So king takes, rook a6 check, king b7. There it is. That's it. You're coming in. That's it. Now I bet you it's more than +5. Oh, now it's +6. But yeah, but it's increased. Rook D8, Rook A2, little swing. And now we can go to the G file. King D6. Okay, yeah, again, that's done. And now watch the evaluation increase further. +8, right? Okay. Bishop says become more and more decisive. And once again, King E7,
Wow.
G5, it takes, and now it's probably like +20. Okay, +10.
Chucked another
But
pawn.
it keeps increasing the valuation. It just keeps improving. What's that?
He chucked another pawn.
Yeah, now we got 2. Now we have an avalanche. Now it becomes an avalanche to use chess metaphors. Pawn, well, actually I said, and the pawns roll in. Quote.
Oh, that's seriously winning right there.
Yeah, steamroller. We call it steamroller. Quote, brilliant. Well, now what do we have? Now it's +10. Okay, basically mate in 30 or something. Brilliant play by the computer, or at least the DeepMind team that unleashed the robot overlord. But yeah, it was interesting just to understand, begin to try to understand in those early days of AlphaZero, 2017, 2018. Understand, I'm pretty sure Magnus, his play changed. I mean, any GM that studies computer, anyone really, but any GM, you'll see their play, I guess, improving. Their openings they can obviously use for opening prep, but they see ideas like, oh yeah, like we talked about earlier with double pawns, triple pawns, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm seeing the computer take on those alpha pawns for some subtle reasons. I can use that too.
Yeah.
Now you might not think about that King E3 or the giving up your whole bishop, right? I mean,
Right.
it's brilliant. I really like the combo, but again, that's tactics flow from a superior position and purely tactical. Well, it's interesting. No, we begin with superior position. We arrive at tactics, and then we don't have a mate. Well, we have lines that mate, but in the line that doesn't mate, we arrive at superior position again, right? Not a mate. It's an end game now, but it's a far superior end game. So you see you can see the complete cascade is cascading the interplay. Interplay was interplay between pawns and pieces, interplay between positional and tactical chess. It's all connected, right?
Once I thought
What's that?
once Manda.
You said why not? What?
Hey, guys, I have to go.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I think we went on for a while there. I think, but okay, so we got 2 in, but those were really good ones. Really
They
made
were very good ones.
Yeah,
a lot going
fantastic.
on. Those were my favorite ones, really. And then we have Kasparov versus, but now it gets more subtle. You guys look at it, but like even this one, you look at like the light square control and stuff. Yeah, so really, thanks for coming, guys. A really great.
All right,
Thank
bring
you
it
so
back
much,
next
David.
week, David.
All right,
Yeah,
take care,
check out the
All
link.
right, bye, everybody.
Look at it. See ya. Enjoy your weekend.
You too.
Thank you,
Happy
you
Father's
too.
Day.
Between festivities.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Bye.
Yeah, I guess New York. I'm sure New York has a lot of good stuff. DC has a lot of good stuff for the week. So yeah, all right, guys, nice work. I'll see you, and thanks for coming back, Uday. John's always here, and Uday, whenever you can make it, and it's far ahead in India, late night. What's that?
Okay, have a good day, everybody.
You too, guys. Enjoy your weekend. See you next week.
Are you gonna play a game?
I got to run actually. I'm gonna go help out at a tournament right now, so it's already pushed a little bit. But like before, there's a girls and women's tournament going on. I volunteer with the group that's going to be there. So my team is there. So I'm gonna kind of help out with some game analysis
Sure.
in the 3rd and 4th round. Yeah. So but yeah, let's try and do some games next time.
Yeah. How about we start like a daily game?
Oh yeah, let's get another day. I know I'm slow at those, but you want to do on chess.com?
How about late chess? Maybe whenever you take one of the classes, just before that, you can log on.
Well, the thing about, okay, I'll stop the recording. Let's figure out which one. All right.